The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, hello and welcome to this month's Laserfiche consulting webinar. My name is Stephen Krutzfeldt. I'm a pre-sales engineer here with CDI, and I'm going to be your host today. I was feeling a little festive this month, so I wanted to do something kind of fun. So today we're going to be using Laserfiche to automate Santa's workshop. It sounds a little bit cheesy, and maybe you're thinking at home, I don't have a workshop with elves where I make toys. How is this going to apply to me? But we're actually going to be looking at a lot of practical uses for the Laserfiche suite of products, a lot of which I think that you can actually use in your organization as well. So before we get started, a little housekeeping items. If this is your first build along, what exactly is a build along? A build along is meant to be an interactive experience. It's designed to guide the viewer through the creation and deployment of a common business process, i.e., I show you something cool and then you turn around and build it in your organization. If you need help, there's a chat box where you can post questions, or rather a questions box. At the end of the webinar, I'll go ahead and set aside some time to answer any questions that you may have. To get the most out of this, take good notes, take screenshots even if you can. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Please complete the survey afterwards, especially now because we're getting ready to start a new year and I'm still in the process of putting together the docket for what types of topics I'm going to cover next year. So anything that you would like to see or you would find beneficial or helpful, let me know, and I'll be sure to add it on. And also note, this will be recorded. Individual sessions are available, and this will actually be posted to our YouTube channel, so you can go back, rewatch it, pause, rewind, so on and so forth. So today's process, automating Santa's workshop. The intended audience for this webinar is going to be Laserfiche admins and intermediate Laserfiche users. And I say that because we're going to be using a little bit more advanced techniques and pieces of the solution. We're actually going to be using about 5 different components of Laserfiche that all tie together to automate this. But of course, being able to isolate any one of these and just use a portion of it is always an option too. But I do recommend having a little bit of Laserfiche experience to get the most out of this. You'll need access to forms, Laserfiche forms. We'll be getting into Laserfiche repository. I'm going to be using the thick client today, but know that the web client is fine also. Laserfiche workflow. We will briefly look at SQL, Management Studio, and the administration console for Laserfiche as well. So if you want to get all those open, we'll be working in each one of those. Otherwise, you can just sit back, and that's fine too. The agenda is going to be, I'm going to go through a demo first and show you how we can automate Santa's workshop beginning to end. And when I say automate Santa's workshop, what I'm saying is we're going to create a list of all of the nice and naughty children. And then for each of the nice children, we're going to figure out what toy that they would like Santa to bring them. And then we're going to task the elves in a round robin type of situation with building that toy and then getting it loaded on Santa's sleigh and ready to go, and then making sure that everybody else is updated. So we're going to be looking at assigning tasks, automating that, notifications, and things like that. After the demo, we'll go through and I'll show you how I set up the folder and the template creation. So from the ground up, building that foundation, and then the workflow and forms that we use to actually move that process through. So with that, let's go ahead and get into it. So Christmas is coming up, right? We have about 20 days left or so until Christmas. You know what, even less, 15 now? Who can keep track of time? Happy 2020 to everyone. So we have Christmas coming up anyway, and Santa needs to start getting all the toys ready and loaded onto his sleigh so that when Christmas Eve comes, he has everything he needs in order to deliver it all in one night. And part of that, all year, he's been keeping track, he as well as the elves on the shelves and Santa's other little helpers are keeping track of all the naughty and nice, good boys and girls. Now, there's a pretty good chance that he's using a pretty complex or comprehensive CRM solution to keep track of all these. We don't know if he uses Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics or Tamrac or what, but he's obviously keeping meticulous notes on the children's behavior and what they've done that year. And for each one of those, we can then create a naughty category with all the naughty children like Buzz and the Grinch and Hans Gruber, Harry and Marv, some of the other villains from various Christmas movies. And then we have the nice folders. People like Buddy Diapers and John McClane, Kevin McAllister and Little Nell and Ralphie Parker, who we're going to be focusing on today. I created these two categories to just kind of keep track of those different folders, knowing that it's likely pulling from some other sort of database. Always remember that Laserfiche is dynamic. It's designed to work in tandem with your other applications. And we can pass that information over as metadata. So if we look at the metadata on Little Buddy Diapers folder here, we can see his name. We can see that he's in the nice category, which is how he got filed here. We can see the toy that he wants most, an Easy Bake Oven, and we can see the toy status. In this case, we're going to say that it's not started yet. And also toy blueprints. So if there's a toy selection dropdown, we can have the blueprints here as well. And I keep all of those in this folder. So we've got only a couple here, but things like BB gun schematics for Ralphie Parker and snowshoes and things like that. And we're going to use that a little bit later when we go into this. But I did want to point out that, as these are being saved, maybe Ralphie Parker wrote a letter to Santa Claus, let him know what he wants. We can have that saved here. It has its own metadata that's going to indicate who the child was that wrote it, what the Christmas document type is, if it's a thank you note or a letter to Santa, etc., and the date it was written, things like that. So throughout the year, we're going to be keeping track of the different documents that the children are sending and the different, maybe we have some notes that the elves are keeping to say that, hey, by the way, today I noticed that Kevin McAllister did something or other. See if we can actually open that up. Maybe not. But we're keeping track of all of the different notes and keeping them all in one easy to find location where they're all being organized. And that's going to determine whether they are naughty or nice. So when that day finally comes, we can generate a list. And I did want to pop into SQL really quick and let you know kind of where this is pulling from originally and how I created these. We should see a Christmas table here inside our external tables database. And if we edit that top 200, we'll be able to see where this is actually coming from. So again, as we are pulling information directly from a CRM that we may have an integration with, such as Salesforce, Tamarack, Dynamics, and so on, there's also the option to simply create a table. You could maybe generate an Excel document internally with all the information that you want, name, naughty or nice, toy, blueprints, things like that. And then we can copy and paste that into a SQL database so we can actually query that using our workflow. So the next piece, just so you know, this is where it's coming from. So Santa is ready to generate his list. He's ready to say that, you know what, we've gathered all the information we need. The time has come to determine who's naughty, who's nice, and all the naughty children are going to get coal in their stockings this year, and the nice children are going to get the toy that they asked for Santa for. So I'm going to go ahead and just run this Christmas business process right here. And what this is going to do is query the list of children, find out if they're nice or naughty. If they're nice, it's going to identify the toy that they want. It's also going to find the blueprints, and then it's going to send out and create a forms process, or rather create a task in forms and round robin assign it to one of the elves. So if we pop over to Santa's workshop then, go ahead and refresh this. And just give it a minute spin. I want you to envision that this workshop is pretty modernized. The elves have a kiosk where they go and they are going to see the task that's been assigned to each one of them. They'll be able to log in to that as as themselves or whomever, and they can actually see that, hey, look, a new toy order came in. The toy order is for this individual. Maybe they can even keep track of the different materials that they're going to need in order to do that. But they're going to say, you know what, assign to me, I'm working on Little Nell's dollhouse. And so they can assign it to themselves and begin work, and then go ahead and also pass it off for inspection once they've completed it. So we'll just give this a second to load here. We have unassigned tasks. What's the deal? Must be a pretty large order. All right, here we go. Okay, so now we see that there were 5 toy orders that came in, which is right because we had 5 nice children we're working with right now. And so these would be sent out and assigned to the different elves. So maybe the first elf says, all right, first toy order. I'm gonna go ahead, assign it to me, pop it open, and let's see what we've got. Apologies for the lag today. You know what we might do is close this out. But this is eating up some of the CPU. All right, so we can see here that we kept it pretty simple. We gave it an order number, so we know exactly which one was assigned, a unique identifier. We see the toy that needs to be built, and we see the name of the child, so that way we know who to label it with once it's all wrapped up and ready to go. And if we want to see the schematics, or if you're for manufacturing, it'd be your bill of materials or your routing steps, we could open that up here. And this will actually, what this is doing is opening up an iframe so you can see one of the documents from the web client directly from the form you're looking at. So this is one of the things that we'll be looking at today is A, how do you have a workflow that automatically kicks off a form's task? And 2, from within that form, how can we create an iframe so we can actually see the document that's been assigned to us? This idea actually came from me from another client that wanted to have documents scanned in to an incoming scans folder, have the workflow assign it to somebody for review, and rather than save it as an attachment or a path where they have to go into Laserfiche and find it, they're like, can we just have it open and just mark on it from here? I said, yeah, absolutely. We'll create an iframe. And if you want to highlight it or redact something or write on it or stamp it as approved or something, you can do all that right here from within this iframe. So if I were to make changes to this, I could actually, you would see those in Laserfiche. So just know that you can save those and things like that. But in this case, everything else is going to be done right there on the workbench. The elf is working hard on creating a Red Ryder BB gun, even though the elf is thinking Ralphie's going to shoot his eye out. He knows it, but that's not his job. His job is to just get the BB gun built. So once he's done, he's going to submit this to say that this is complete. The next step here is going to be inspection. So once the inspection is being routed, imagine I'm a different elf. I work on the inspection line. I see like, all right, BB gun came through. Let's go ahead and go through our different inspection points. Order number 297, we'll be able to see up here in the action history of, well, it says forms completed this task because that's who I'm signed in as, but we'd be able to see the name of the elf that completed the build. We'll be able to see when it was submitted, things like that. And they can go ahead and open up their checklist, be like, all right, let's go ahead and inspect the toy. And then now that it's inspected, everything looks good. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. It's wrapped. Make sure it's tagged for Ralphie Parker. And then once it's loaded on Santa's sleigh, if all of these are checked, then we are good to go and we can submit this. And then it's time for the next toy order to go through. Now, if you are planning correctly, all of these will be ready to go by Christmas Eve so Santa can run out and deliver them all to the children. Once these are complete also, we go back into Laserfiche. That was Ralphie Parker. So we'll be able to see that the inspection was complete and we can pop in and see the PDF with exactly what happened and when it was submitted, when it was inspected, as well as the actual form itself with the inspection information and everything else on it here. So that's our process. Now let's go ahead and just reverse engineer this for a second. What are some of the components that go into building this process out? Well, number one, you're going to need to have your folder structure. Folder structure, like anything else, basics, Laserfiche 101. It works in sort of a tree fashion. In this case, it's a Christmas tree fashion. And the different folders hang off like little ornaments. Super cheesy, Steve. So here I've got a list of them, and this was generated though by using a workflow that was querying SQL and then create a folder based on these. So let me show you how that would work. We'll go into our workflow designer, create a new workflow, and if you want to query a Salesforce, let's just say this is going to be webinar, query SQL. Best practice is to always give it a descriptive name so you know what the workflow is doing. Give it a description so anyone else that comes in can also see from a high level, if they don't get it from the name, what it's going to do. And if you don't know what the connection profile is, chances are you can click on here, manage workflow connection profiles, and add, and there's probably one saved in here, so you can probably copy from one. In this case, mine's business, but this is going to be a workflow user that will need to have access to, not only query SQL, but also be able to create folders, assign metadata, and everything else. So you'll need to have a super user or a some sort of service account hooked up here. So the next piece, you can always search the toolbox, and if you just type in SQL, it'll give you some of the workflow activities that can be used in SQL. So the one thing I want to do is not custom query, unless you know standard query language or simple query language, but query data is much more user-friendly. So we can drag that in here and basically say that we're going to query the Christmas table. You will need to configure your data source. Mine is looking at the LF external tables, so the database type would be SQL Direct. The database is going to be the LF external tables, and then authentication is just using Windows authentication. So you may have a little bit of things that you need to set up there, but if it's correct, you'll be able to see all the different tables from within that database in the drop down here. So I could say that, you know what, I want to look at the Christmas one, Christmas list. If you were to test that query, we'll see that there are 10 rows in it. And so it's just going to grab all 10 rows. So then we can use a for each loop. We're going to say for each row. These can get tricky. Let's talk about these for a second. There's a couple different for eaches. Some are purple, some are green, some are orange. What's going on here? The most commonly used one is going to be for each entry. That is going to be used when you're referring to some sort of Laserfiche object, either a Laserfiche folder or a Laserfiche document. You want to find all of the documents, and then for each document, that equals for each entry. When you are working in SQL, you are querying different rows. And so that is when, if you're querying SQL, always use for each row. There are also times when you would have for each value. This could actually also be used likely. Oops, let's go ahead and bring this in too. The values are going to be, if you are retrieving certain values or other information where each one of those values, if maybe it's multi-value token, each one of those values needs to have its own workflow, that's when you would use that. But the two that you'll be using most likely, most of the time, will be for each entry, or if it's SQL, for each row. So in this case, for each row, it'll kind of let you know also, because you'll need to say for each what? Which rows? Rows in the query, the Christmas table rows. Perfect. And then so for each row, you can then create. We'll drag our create in here for each. And for each entry is going to be the for each row name. It's going to be a folder that we are creating, and we're going to be creating it within the, I think I was doing it in projects, Santa, just under the Santa, for example. And then for each one, you can go ahead and assign. assign the field values, which is saying we're going to put a metadata template on each one of these. We're going to assign the Christmas folder to each one. The values are going to be maybe just these three. And you can say that the child name is going to be the for each row name. Naughty or nice is going to be the for each row naughty or nice. Toy, you guessed it, for each row toy. And so essentially what this is then going to do, we can publish this and just run it. And what that'll do is go through the SQL table that we saw already and create a folder for each one of those. Practical application, if you have a list of 100 different folders that you want to create, and you don't want to go through and just Control N, new folder, name it, Control N 100 times, if you already have that in an Excel document, you can copy that into SQL. Workflow can query that table and create those folders for you. So pretty slick there. I'm not going to run this because it'll mess up my folders, but that's how I created the ones that are already in there. Another thing you can do here too, though, is if you want to change this so it's being created within the correct folder, you can say token picker. So I'm on the create entry activity here. On the destination, we use this button here, token dialog. Backslash means another level of, or another layer of the folders. So projects root folder, Santa subfolder, and then we want to go into like the naughty or nice, right? When we're querying that, it changes for each one of these. So we could say for each row, naughty or nice, and that'll be the name of the folder. And then backslash. And so we'll go inside that. If you have any questions, you can enter those and I'll address them afterwards here. All right, so the next piece, and actually the more interesting one, let me go ahead and show you the workflow that I ran. So this is the business process that I ran, right? When I was in Laserfiche and I just clicked a random button and all of a sudden all of those things got built in forms. Not really all that difficult. The first thing I did was I was just finding entries. Now, I'm finding folders with inside of the folder with this ID. If you're not sure what that means, let me show you. Inside Laserfiche, every single folder, every single document has a unique identifier, kind of like a license plate that's assigned to it by Laserfiche. And that's just automatic. If you want to see what that is, I can go ahead, right click here, go to properties on either the folder or the document, and it will open up and give me my folder ID or my entry ID in this case, 11074. So that's the unique identifier for that. Why would we use a unique identifier when it has a name? Well, because sometimes folders have the same name. And if you want to make sure that you're getting the right one and you're always looking at it, even if that name changes, you can't change an ID. So it's consistent. It's very easy to maintain. So what I did was I said find all of the folders inside of that folder. And then for each entry, not for each row, but for each entry, i.e. for each folder, retrieve the field values. Retrieve field values is one of the first activities I put on almost every single workflow because that's what's going to tell my workflow what to do. That's giving it the information that it needs. Usually when we're talking about the importance of metadata, we're saying that, you know, it's easier to search for things. You can run reports on it. I've got a lot of different reasons why metadata is important to have on your different documents and folders. But I'm also a little bit selfish because I build a lot of workflows and my workflows need to have that metadata to know what to do. And so if that metadata is already there, the workflow runs a lot smoother. So the most important reason, in my humble opinion, to have metadata on documents and folders is so the workflows can run more smoothly. So I'm retrieving that information, child name, naughty or nice, toy blueprints, and toy status. And then this is the fun part. I'm creating a web URL that's going to drive my iframe, and I'm also then invoking the workshop forms process. So let's take a look at this. Actually, I want to take a look at this one first. when you are configuring a invoke or forms process, you can go ahead and type in your toolbox forms, and it'll show you the 3 different Laserfiche Forms activities. One is retrieve business process variables. This is the equivalent of retrieve field values for forms processes. So what that means is retrieve field values is going to look at the metadata on a folder or document. These are field values from the template, and these are the fields. However, if you're retrieving business process variables, that is retrieving the information on the forms process. So on here, I don't know why I opened this up. I'm like, oh, it'll just pop right open. It'll be super fast and it'll be great. But the fields that are written and filled out on this form, so the name of the child, the name of the toy, the name of, and the order number, those are business process variables. So if I was submitting a form and then I wanted the workflow to kick off based on that, I would retrieve business process variables. In this case, though, we want to do the opposite of that. We want to add business process variables. So we would drag this in, say invoke business process, and for each entry. So retrieve the information and then invoke. And on here, the first thing you're going to need to do is simply point it toward your forms server. In many cases, Forms is probably installed on the same server as Laserfiche. In this case, that's what's happening. So that's why I'm able to just say localhost Forms, and we can use the default authentication that we have because we already have that connection established. If you don't know where that is, you may need to do a little bit of research and find out where Forms is installed. It's likely either on a Laserfiche server or on a web server. And then you'll need to set up your authentication. You can say that either the workflow service account, i.e. the exactly same account we have for this whole process, is going to start it, or you can have everything authenticated from maybe a Forms user or something else. Now, the most important piece here is the fields and the starting variable values, because this is what we're going to pass into Forms to get it started. So if you click in this box, you should see another window open. It's going to give me a list of the different business process variables. So my forms process, we saw it open up and start with a workshop, but we're actually passing information over to the first form, which is the submission. So the submission is going to have its own list of fields. So if we open that up, we can see blueprints, child name, order number, and toy. So some of the basic information there. So that's what we're mainly going to need to pass over. So if you go down to here, you can say, all right, those are our variables. So if you go into the token picker, we have our variables, and it's going to be the ones I just mentioned. And this is beginning to essentially write the process out. Like, what are going to be the values that we are then passing into that form? So when we saw our example, we saw little Ralphie's name in the form already. That's because if we take that out of here, actually, if I said, all right, variable child name, it's going to write child underscore name equals, what does it equal? Well, it's going to be Ralphie's folder's name, the one that we retrieved as a business, or sorry, not as a business process, but rather the one we retrieved the field value from. So retrieve field value, child name. So that's how that worked. It found each folder, grabbed the information off the folder, and then for each one, it invoked a new process. It ran that form one time for this information and assigned it. So I hope that makes sense. You're saying which fields you want to fill out and the fields you want to fill out to them. It's then just kicking off the forms process. Now the forms process is of course going to have to be filled out and designed separately in order to facilitate the rest of the process, but this is how you kick it off. Now the last piece we have here is the web URL, and that's important because that's how we create an iframe. we're essentially just viewing the Laserfiche repository from the web client inside of like a little window called an iframe. So pointing it where to go and what to look at is going to be important here. And all I did to create this is I made sure that I had my server location, which is right here, Laserfiche, doc view, and then the name of the repository. And it's going to change each time depending on which blueprints they're using. And the blueprints, by the way, if you remember right, are the document ID for each one of those. So for example, toy blueprints here, we have the Easy Bake Oven for Buddy. If we look at the metadata on this, we just see what it is. But if we look at the properties rather, we'll see it has an entry ID of 11096. It's a very specific license plate for this document. So if we go back up to Buddy, we look at the metadata on Buddy's thing, we can see 11096 is the blueprints. So I'm saying for his toy, these are the blueprints. So from there, we can actually go into the Laserfiche web client, and it'll essentially write that for us. Let's try this again. So I'm just going to open up a new tab and go to the Laserfiche web client quick. So you will notice that when I log in, it's creating that path for me. Now the web client is installed on this server. This is our web server. So it's just saying localhost. And then Laserfiche browse, database equals Laserfiche business, ID equals 1. If I start going through here, maybe I want to look at, actually not public, sorry. If I want to look at projects and Santa and toy blueprints and a specific toy blueprint maybe I want to actually open up and view it, then this is the URL I'm working with. And so all I did was copy this and I replaced localhost with the actual path, made sure that that matched the other one, and then that's going to become my URL. So if we go back to the workflow, we can see that it's exactly what I had there. Just instead of localhost, we have the actual server, or it could be the FQDN for the server. So once that's in place, we can actually pass that over. And let's go ahead and open up the Forms Designer so we can see what's happening on that end. We should see it load here in a second. By the way, I went to Forms and then Design. So this is where you would design a new form. You will need administrative access to Forms in order to even see that. You may not see the Design tab there, and that just means you don't have access. And they'll give me a list of all of them I can work with. So Santa's Workshop right there at the top. And I always say there are two sides of the Forms coin. There's the form itself with the different fields that will be filled out, and then there's the routing steps. Now, mine is pretty simple, but know that you can have different Boolean decisions being made, saying that if this, then go this way. If accepted, move on. If rejected, return to the initiator to make changes, etc. And I have 3 different versions of the form as well. So the Christmas submission is going to be the first one. That's essentially what's happening when my workflow is kicked off. When I click that button, that green gear on the top of the Laserfiche toolbar, I'm saying go through, query all of the folders, grab the information, and then pass that over here. And here I have the child name, the toy, and the order number, which by the way, when I set this up, I said, you know what, this is just going to be the process ID. Rather than trying to generate something else, I said, you know what, default value, insert variables, and just go with the instance or the process ID. It's going to be a unique identifier that can be carried on and passed for each one all the way down. And also blueprints is going to be just that ID, I believe. You know what? Now I don't remember if I pass it on as the URL or not. Okay, so the blueprints is the URL. So that's going to be the actual URL. So this right here, that 192 Laserfiche, the actual view, that's what we're passing over as that variable. So if we go back here, imagine we now have the blueprint URL. We have the order number, we have the toy and child name. When that gets kicked off, though, we need to be able to click a button, a little checkbox that will then open that iframe up. Now, the way to create an iframe is to actually use a custom HTML field. So I just dragged this over and created the custom HTML. If you want to see what the actual code looks like, and this is something that we can provide for you as well. Remind me later, though. Remind me afterwards. Come on, open up. Edit. So when you're using the custom HTML activity, it's going to default to the visual, and it's going to basically write basic HTML just with the P opening, closing brackets to say whatever you write in here, it's going to display as a paragraph. If you want to display something as an iframe, you need to have the bracket over here of iframe. I always add the width of 100% and the height about 800, and then you need to have the source. And to close it, it's just going to be the bracket, the / iframe, exactly like that. If you're going to write something down or take a screenshot, this would be the right time to do that. The variable and like what the actual source is going to be in parentheses and then the curly brackets here. So dataset blueprints is saying that whatever was in that last field, the URL is being passed over to the blueprints. The blueprints is being passed over as the source for this. So that is what is enabling that iframe to work. The way I hid it was simply using field rules. So if we go to the field rules, you can say things like hide this unless this checkbox is checked or something similar. In this case, that's exactly what I made it do. It's just going to load really slowly. Okay, not super important, I guess. Field rules are relatively intuitive. Everything's just going to lag. Let's go back to our layout. Actually, while this is loading, I think I have something I can share. When I say loading, I mean crashing, apparently. While this is crashing. All right. Just going to bring this up quick in Notepad so you can see it. This is like my little note that whenever I need to make an iframe, I just remind myself and I copy and paste this. So it's iframe width equals 100%, height equals 800, source equals, and this source is going to be what you need to put in there, and that's going to be the actual what we had in here. So that's URL. So a good way to look at that would be, why don't we just go ahead and create a new form that's just an iframe and nothing else. Maybe forms will let us back in. Maybe it'll cooperate with us. All right, so this will just be our test. What is going on? Let's try this again. I feel bad for those of you on this call because once this is on YouTube, we're going to clean this up. It's going to go a lot faster and speed up. It's like watching a live taping without a laugh track. Oh, you know what? I should invest in laugh tracks. Or like a little applause sign. Just wow. Wow, wow, wow. All right. Well, it looks like we are just crashing. So the takeaway from this, I'm sorry we can't get back into that, but definitely write this down. And from the HTML custom activity in forms, you will go to the HTML tab and you'll just paste this and use the token picker to select your token. And your token should be a full URL that should start with https:// name of server / Laserfiche, and then it should look very similar to, you know what? I have it right here. It should look like this. One thing, so full disclosure, I was having trouble getting my iframe to load, and what I found out was that my iframe had the name of the excuse me, the name of the server in it, whereas I was accessing forms from localhost. So it was like localhost forms. Those two have to match. So if you're going to be accessing Laserfiche from localhost, go ahead and have localhost in the path. If you're going to be accessing it from externally but still on the network, you won't have the server name. Just make sure that both of them have the server name. So a detail that you may have missed was I was actually accessing this by having the IP address up here in the forms URL. If that was localhost, then I would want to make sure that localhost was also written in my iframe. But that is how you would do it. So to recap, two fun little takeaways is in order to invoke a forms process from workflow, you want to use the invoke business process activity, tell it which variables you want, and then tell those variables which other variables you're going to assign them. All right. So to kind of wrap things up and put a bow on this, if you will, there's a lot of different resources out there for other Laserfiche related content. You don't need to get all of it from my YouTube videos, although I would say I would hope that these are the most entertaining of all of them. But you can also go to Laserfiche Answers. The Solution Exchange is another one, and also the support site for Laserfiche has a lot of good stuff on it too. With that, I will open it up for questions. What questions do you guys have? And again, really sorry for the connectivity issues. Hopefully we can get that resolved, get this cleaned up. It'll turn a 45-minute webinar into about 30 minutes. All right, sorry, just trying to get this opened up here. Oh, so the the connection was going in and out, you say? What percentage of that did you hear? I guess. All right, not hearing much. So I'll probably wrap things up here. Uh, we'll obviously go through and make sure that the as much of the connection as possible, but we'll definitely trim it up or whatever. Feel free to reach out directly if you have any other questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna wrap things up here, and thanks very much for joining. We'll see you later.